Has Canada survived the worst of its inflation woes? I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. CP24 reports that Canada's inflation rate has fallen back to the country's target range for the first time in more than 2 years. But economists say the fight against high inflation is far from over. So, as of this month, annual inflation tumbled to just 2.8%, and everyone started cheering. Politicians were telling you just how lucky you were to see that number. But there is one thing I want to clarify right off the bat. Inflation is not over. Keep in mind, the number is still positive. That means all of the rapid inflation that we experienced over the past 2 years is still lingering in the background. That junior chicken is not going down in price. Those groceries are not going down in price. They're just appreciating at a slightly lower rate. Even if inflation becomes 2% from now until the end of your life every year, we still have to put into consideration the fact that things have grown exponentially and that 2% is being applied to a higher base. For example, if a junior chicken was only $1, 2% inflation would bring that to $1.02. But if a junior chicken is already $2 because of prior inflation, 2% is going to bring that up to $2.04 now. And these price increases will accrue to you across all of your daily spending. So no, you don't really have much to thank the politicians for. They screwed you over. Now they're screwing you over just slightly less than before. If we wanted things to actually get back to how they were before, which may not even be a realistic or a smart goal, but hypothetically speaking, inflation rates would have to be negative. We'd have to have something like a negative 2% inflation rate. Things would have to be deflationary for you to return to your prior spending power. So now to dig deeper into the numbers, Canadians are still continuing to pay far higher prices for things like groceries. In that bucket, prices rose 9% year over year. And things actually picked up in May, so not too long ago. Chrystia Freeland, Canada's finance minister, called the return of inflation to the target range a quote-unquote milestone moment. And I do agree with that. Given what I've said, don't let that detract from the fact that inflation is cooling, and that's a good thing. It'd be worse if inflation was not budging, given the rapid rise in interest rates, or if inflation was getting way worse. Things are getting better, but inflation still persists, and things are still expensive. That's the bottom line. Now, Freeland's next quote is where she goes terribly off the rails. She says that this should provide a lot of relief to Canadians. What relief is she talking about? This is just pure politicking. She thinks the average Canadian is a dum-dum, and they're going to see that the inflation rates have gone down, and they might assume in their head that means prices are going down. That's not true. As we just outlined, it just means the continual increase in prices is going to slow down. But things are not going to get cheaper. We are not experiencing deflation. Inflation is still there. All of the compounding effects of prior inflation are going to remain. That junior chicken is not going to go back to $1.69. It might grow at a slower rate, but you're still screwed. Where is the relief she's talking about? It's nowhere to be found. Now, the Central Bank of Canada didn't paint such a rosy picture. They're in fact indicating that they're still concerned about the trajectory of inflation. Just because 1 month you've reached your target, it doesn't mean now all of a sudden they're going to flip the script and start decreasing interest rates. The Bank of Canada is surely going to wait. They're going to want a few more months of data to see if the trend is holding. Has inflation really cooled? Or is just a matter of arbitrary monthly changes and not a long-term consistent pattern? The worst case scenario would be they either pause rates or start reducing them while inflation has not been tamed, and they bring it back stronger than ever. I can almost assure you they're going to take a cautious, measured approach here. Now, many people are suffering and they're wondering why the Bank of Canada is doing this, and there is some logic to the madness. Essentially, these aggressive rate hikes are intended to cut off demand in the market. They want to make it more expensive for you as an individual to consume things and more costly for businesses to borrow so they can't expand or hire as much. And the overarching goal of this is to bring down demand, as we just said. When demand goes down, prices will cool. One very simple situation that illustrates this is, for example, if the interest rates are low, it means you have more access to capital because less costly for you to borrow. People are far more likely to take on debt if it's only accruing an interest rate of something like 2% versus 5%. And those numbers only seem like a 3% difference between them, but we're talking about more than doubling your interest expense. Anyone with a mortgage right now knows how crippling that can be. So, if at the 2% interest rate, you had 100 people who'd be willing to go to the car dealership for a supply of 90 cars, well, the dealership has leverage there. They can bring prices up, and presumably, given there is more demand than the supply, prices will inch upward. Now, if you reverse that equation, and if you raise interest rates to something like 5%, and only 25 people are there willing to buy the car supply of 90, well, the buyers have all the power there. The dealership will not be able to jack up costs. They're going to have to compete. There's only 25 cars to sell potentially there. If we assume each person's only buying one, there's going to be leftover. As a salesperson, you're going to have to incentivize people to go with you and not the competitor. From the corporate standpoint, if interest rates are high, you're going to be less likely to acquire capital and use it to do things like expand your operations and grow, further bringing down demand in the economy and even reducing labor. And that's another key factor that's being looked at. The Bank of Canada in some ways actually wants labor to go down. They do want to see unemployment go up. Why would that be a good thing for them? Because it would further reduce demand on the economy. If you don't have a job, what can you buy? And this all sounds very bad, and it is a tough situation. The Bank of Canada only has one tool. Keep in mind, they are not politicians. They're not the Prime Minister. All they can do is leverage and change the interest rates. That's it. So if there's a problem, they're going to have to change the interest rates to meet that. Now, politicians, on the other hand, also have a responsibility. They have to respond to the Bank of Canada's decision and ensure the average Canadian isn't left in complete destitution. And as far as I can see, they failed at that. A dual income household can barely afford to get by. They can't even buy a house, even a starter house. That truly isn't all the fault of the Bank of Canada. The politicians have a lot of blame to carry themselves too. It is true that currently if you hold any debt with an interest rate tied to the Bank of Canada's decisions, you're going to be hurting. But everyone's hurting because of inflation, and we do have to tame it, and this is one way that we can. There is going to be short-term struggle for hopefully long-term benefit. And it is unfortunate, but we were led here via a pattern of bad ideas and decisions. We had the government, not even just the Canadian one, but across the world, spending obscene amounts of money during the pandemic. These things come with a cost. Money cannot just be printed ad hoc and handed out with no strings attached. When you spend more money than ever in history, of course things like demand are going to go through the roof. Of course you're going to enter a period of high inflation. Then, this is on the Bank of Canada's side, when you keep interest rates too low for too long, of course you're going to shoot up the prices of things like assets, including housing and whatever else. Then we have a housing disaster in Canada. If people didn't have to spend obscene amounts of their income and savings on getting a house, they'd be less affected by interest rate increases. If you have a mortgage of $500,000, you're going to be far more crippled by even a 0.25% increase in interest rates versus if your mortgage was only $200,000, for example. All of these factors have played together to leave us in our current environment. There isn't an easy solution anymore. The time for that has passed. There were things that the politicians and the Bank of Canada and the Prime Minister could have done before, but now we have to make tough decisions because of short-term thinking and lack of future planning. Now, to close, I do want to share a couple of recent headlines that are coming up in the news. So Jagmeet Singh, leader of the federal NDP party, proposed that the federal government enact quote-unquote real solutions and aggressive steps, such as forcing banks to give lower interest rates to families that are struggling, and, this is the part that got people upset, a subsidy for people who can't pay their mortgage right now. So, Jagmeet Singh and his party were supposed to be standing up for the working class. Many working class Canadians right now don't have a mortgage. Why? Because they're priced out. They can't afford to live in Canada. So they have to rent. Jagmeet Singh seems very concerned about those with a mortgage. And whether you agree with this or not, this was the criticism. People were saying, who do you really support? Is it the poor, the working class that don't have a mortgage? Or is it those with property, the landowners? and you want to take our tax dollars and subsidize them? Now, I'm not sure I agree with this type of characterization, but that's the feedback that he's been getting. And it's been problematic for his party because it seems like he's lost favor there. Then we also have data from the Montreal Economic Institute. They did a poll, and it revealed that fewer than 1 in 4 Canadians believe that the federal government is spending on the right things. They feel like Canada has money, which is true. Canada is a wealthy country. That's true. We're a blessed nation. That's true. But our leaders are squandering our resources and not being smart. The vast majority of Canadians agree with that. The money's being spent in all the wrong places. 2 in 3 Canadians also say that their tax burden is too high. They see that the government has plenty of money, and they're wasting it. So they're saying, why am I giving you so much money? If you're not doing anything to improve my situation, my community situation, Canada's situation, what are you even doing with these tax dollars? When you have dire economic situations, and a population who is feeling that the government is not doing the right thing, the current government has a lot to worry about. And I think that is deservedly. The current Canadian government, whether that's at the federal, municipal, or provincial level, should be stepping up more. Instead, what I'm seeing is, as this poll indicated, a total confusion of priorities, a waste of money, a lack of real action. Hopefully the pressure is going to turn up on them and they're going to do things to help the average Canadian get the economy back in control and make things cheaper. Don't let them confuse you and make you believe that a slowing inflation rate is going to make things cheaper. That's not the case. There has to be more done. Now, with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.